Welcome everybody to Live from NCCE. And we have a treat for you today. We have co-presenters. We haven't had that. I don't think we've had that for a long time. And I'm super excited because both of them are experts in accessibility and they're both NCCE professional learning specialists. We have Kristen Harrington. Kristen's book, Adventures in Authentic Learning, 21 Step-by-Step Projects for the EdTech Coach, is published by ISTE. She's an ISTE award winner. She's absolutely amazing. And there she is. And John Pauls, Dr. John Pauls, he just does everything. If you haven't watched his videos on YouTube and listened to his podcast, you're really missing out. He's got some amazing credentials. And John Pauls, are you still working on that? What is it? The Ultra program?
Yes.
It's like
so
$1 million
we are.
project?
Yeah, so $3.5 million that we secured to study how gamification, game-based learning impacts the STEM performance for students with disabilities in K through 5. And so it's ongoing. We're getting some amazing data. So keep an eye out on those publications because you're going to want to see what we found out.
Absolutely. So thank you both for being here. And we are super excited to hear what you have to say about accessibility for everybody.
For everybody. Well, thank you so much, Tammy. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for Live from NCCE. We're so excited to be here. We only have a short amount of time together, so we are going to spend some time learning some tips and tricks, but we're also going to explore how you can take what we're talking about tonight and extend your learning, because I think and I hope at the end of our time together, you will feel that that is an important thing for you to be doing. So we're going to pause right quick. We've got a little QR code on the screen. It's just a handy dandy little resource guide for you. So if you want to access that, it's got some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight. Feel free to do so. So my name is John Pauls. I am a learning experience designer and professor at Jacksonville University in Jacksonville, Florida, and I'm an NCCE professional learning specialist. And I am joined by Kristen Harrington, a virtual learning coordinator and author from the Florida Diagnostic and Learning Resource System, known as Fiddlers here in Florida. We're both super excited to be here with you, and we're going to get it kicked off together. If you are new to NCCE, it's the Northwest Council for Computer Education, and it is our mission to learn, to innovate, and to lead. So whether it is coaching educators on the ground in school districts like what exists in Gallup, New Mexico, or working with higher education, an amazing conference every year, and lots of meaningful connections for teachers, by teachers. It is just this space. So we are excited to be affiliated with NCCE. Make sure to go to ncce.org to learn more about how we could help any of your educational institutions meet their digital learning goals and outcomes. Before we get started today, we first want to take just a moment to frame our conversation and our understanding for tonight. When we talk about something like accessibility, we are doing so because accessibility is important. Accessibility also takes intentional effort. And providing access is always going to be worth that investment. So as we talk about these things, please consider the importance of what we're talking about in order to make sure that everybody has access to your learning experiences and materials and opportunities in our classrooms and beyond. Together, we're going to explore a little bit how we provide access to everyone in our own work, in our own worlds, whether it's during professional learning or teaching core lessons. How can we make sure everybody has access? What you're going to get tonight is a little snippet, sort of a little advertisement of what is to come. Accessibility is an incredibly important aspect of who we are as educators and learning specialists or designers. And so it's going to take more than just a one-time sit through and talk about some of the high-flying issues. So we actually have a series coming up. We had our first little session. We've got some recordings. We put in the link for you. This is an abridged version tonight, but we're also going to meet again on January 28th from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern. And we're going to dig deeper into the engagement aspect of accessibility. How do we engage our learners in an accessible and authentic manner? And that engagement piece fits into our universal design for learning framework that we're going to talk about in just a minute. So if you don't have anything going on January 28th, put that in your calendar. Look out on our social medias at NCCE and we'll get that information for you. So I'm going to pass it over to Kristen, and she's going to talk about why this is so important beyond just what we need to do. Why is it really important now?
Great. Thank you, John. So we always have a why, which John has really clearly demonstrated beyond just compliance. But we are going to talk a little bit about compliance tonight, and that is from a new rule that was released by the Department of Justice, and it is an ADA Title II update, and they are calling this the final rule, which I'm like, whew, when is anything ever final? But they are actually calling this a final rule for the Title II of ADA. And so I'm just going to give you a really brief overview of what that entails and what it means for any of us that are working in education. So this next slide popping up kind of gives you the why that the Department of Justice put out along with this rule. And when we have individuals with disabilities that use screen readers, assistive technology, and just really anything they need to access content, there are some things that are really important. And the first thing they thought of was privacy. So if we ask individuals, say, that aren't able to access information on a website, to come in live to a school or to an office to access information and get help from someone, well, that's a privacy issue. And the one reason they extended this rule is to kind of allow for privacy for everyone. And then along with that is this middle one here, independence. So if we're having to rely on others to accomplish just day-to-day tasks, that's not providing independence. So by having some of these accessibility features in place, it allows that privacy independence, as well as the last one, which is that equal access. So, you know, where some could go on and renew their driver's license online in 10 minutes, it's not equitable to ask someone, oh no, you have to come into the office and make an appointment and we'll be able to help you. So this rule is kind of tackling that issue that we've had in the past, where yes, it was accessible, but not really equitable. So that is where this comes in. So this next slide popping up here is who is required to conform to this law. And it is all state and local governmental entities, which includes all public schools, districts, and then higher ed public colleges and universities as well. And what does it actually mean? Because I know that's what you're wondering right now. This is new to you and you're just hearing this for the first time. It is compliance with something called WCAG, which is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And the requirement is that we would adhere to 2.1 level AA standards. And stay tuned if this is brand new to you. We're going to dive just very quickly into it tonight, but even further in those other webinars coming up for the rest of this year. And just really quick, we have some timelines for implementation as well. So this was just released this past April. And for any organizations with population of 50,000 or more, and this is by the size of the district, not the size of amount of students in the school, the size of the district according to the US Census. So any over 50,000 will need to comply by April 24th of 2026. So this is going to be, at least in Florida, where we have large districts, this is the majority. You know, some of you that have smaller states, it may be a little different. And then less than 50,000 is by April 24th of 2027.
Perfect. So we got a little bit of the importance of the why. One, yes, we have these regulations that we want to conform to, but also I do want to point out that sometimes when we have these conversations about accessibility, we can get lost in the weeds because we're dealing with legalities, we're dealing with these regulations. And so often I have been in situations where people may come and sit down and say, you're not doing this, you're not doing this, and you're not doing this. And it can be really burdensome. It can feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not doing any of this right. Just know there's a big diversity of access issues. And so what we're going to try and do is cast a very wide net, a wide net that we can make sure that we capture as many learners as possible. There are things that I do in my own practice for certain student population that would make it inaccessible for other student populations. Accessibility is not a one-size-fits-all approach to anything. We have to know what the tools are, know why we're doing what we're doing, and then we apply that to our everyday lives. So don't feel overwhelmed. Don't stress out. We're going to build these skills together. And at the end of the day, you're going to feel really proud that our students and our learners are having more successful access to what we're trying to present. So we do have our trail guide. Again, if you've not scanned that yet, we can put this link in the chat. It's ncce.link/TG. And so if you want to access this, it's just a little guide that's going to give you some access to these tips and tricks. So tonight is going to be an abridged little version we have, but we're going to split it up into two little paths on our accessibility adventure. The first path we're going to go down is with Kristen, and we're going to take the path about accessibility in practice. What are practical things that we can do to make our learning design more accessible for everybody? And once Kristen's done with her little accessibility in practice area, we're going to veer over and look at what it looks like to design accessible learning experiences. Because while they definitely work together, there are specific things that we can do in each sector that's going to make our learning outcomes and processes for our students much more impactful. So we're going to go ahead and veer off to the left, and I'm going to pass it over to Kristen, who's going to talk about accessibility in practice.
Great. Thank you. So on the screen here, there is the WCAG guidelines being scrolled through. And the point of that is to show you that this can probably seem overwhelming. Even for me, there's some that I have to really research and watch YouTube videos to figure out what they mean. But the good news is most of the complicated ones are something that really only like software developers, vendors that are creating platforms would need to use. So John and I have already broken this down into what do you as an educator need to know in order to support your students. And we're going to just focus on those throughout this year. So if you're feeling overwhelmed with WCAG and you've already pulled up that website and you're like, oh my gosh, get me out of here, it's okay. We're going to break it down for you. And we're going to do just some very simple tips and hands-on practice for you. So these are the guidelines. So under the WCAG, they really are just focused on these four things, which is perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Perceivable means that we can use our senses to access the information. Not anyone would be able to do that. Operable is being able to navigate the information. So literally like the tools that you use, the platforms. Whereas understandable, the third one there is more for like cognitive accessibility. So can we understand the content that is presented to us? And then robust just means that can we, does it work on all platforms, all browsers, all devices now and also in the future? And all of those together is forms our POUR principles. They're called the POUR principles. There it is. So I could talk about this for months and you don't want to hear that. So I have actually broken it down into just one tip today, which is based on the WCAG standard that is going to be popping up there in just a minute. And that is 1.4.3, which is the visual presentation of text and images of text has a contrast ratio of at least 4.5 to 1. And it does have some exceptions. I left those off. If you are like, whoa, and your head is spinning, it's okay, because I had to read that probably like 20 times before I understood it the first time. So we're going to turn that around into something very basic and simple, which is, you just got a sneak peek, use colors that pop and everyone can see. So that is really all that long standard means, is use colors that pop and everyone can see. So let's look a little closer at what that really means. And we have a fun game we're going to play today too. So for contrast to fit with the WCAG standards, it needs to have a ratio of 4.5 to 1. And that's still, you might be like, okay, what does that mean? We're going to dive into that. We suggest that you use a color contrast checker. The one I really like to use is WebAIM, which we're going to explore a little bit more on the next few slides. And that is included in your trail guide as well. So which two colors have the greatest contrast? This is going to help us understand that 4.5 to 1 ratio. Just kind of think about that while we're going into the next slide. Which two colors? And it is black and white, which a lot of you probably already guessed. And if you think about mostly when we're reading print, oftentimes it's going to have a white or off-white background with black text. Almost every book that you read, every magazine, that is what that is going to have. And we can see there highlighted or with a green box around it, that is a ratio of 21 to 1. So we just have to go to 4.5 to 1 but black and white has that ratio of 21:1. And this is a little sneak peek at that WebAIM color contrast checker. So we're going to play a game. It is called Contrast or Clash. And I may not be able to see your answers, but still put it in. And I want you to look at this background, this pretty green, which is one of our NCCE brand colors, with that purple text. And just consider, without looking at a checker, don't cheat. Do you think that this has enough contrast? Would it meet that AA WCAG guideline? And then we're going to click. So we're going to take just like 5 seconds. We're going to click to the next slide and see if this does have enough contrast or not. All right. And it does not. It is a clash, not a contrast. And one thing I want to point out, if that ratio is giving you some trouble, we can see here, this one says it's 2.89:1. But even if you forget what the ratio is, you can just look down a little further and it literally tells you that it fails on all accounts. It fails at every level. And so you don't really need to know the ratio if you use this WebAIM checker. You just need to, scroll down and it will tell you if it fails or passes. So that is all you need to know. We're going to go to the next one. Let's see how we do. I see there's more comments coming in. So some of you are putting in what you think. Some of you are afraid to tell if it's contrast or clash. The point to this, I want to tell you really quick, is that it's almost impossible to know without running it. Even I've been doing this a long time, but I still have to check quite often. And sometimes things I think are going to pass don't. So it's just always, when in doubt, use the checker to check. So let's check this one. What do you think? Contrast or clash? Let's find out. And this one is a clash-ish. And let me show you why. So if you scroll down, you'll see that it does not pass at normal text size. But if we go down a little bit more, it does. And there's going to be an animation popping up. John, if you click one more time, or 2 more times actually. So if you look here, it says that it does pass. And when it will pass is if it is a 14 bold print or 18. So large text would be 14 bold or 18. If you have that in your presentation or your flyer or your social media post and it meets that, then it would be acceptable at a ratio of 3:1. And again, you don't have to remember those ratios because this is going to do it for you and tell you that it will pass. So that one is a tricky. All right. I think this is our last one. So what do you think about this one? Is it a contrast or clash? We've got this pretty purple with the gray text. And this one does pass. It passes at AA, which is the level that we need. It's a 5.26:1 there, and it passes at normal and large text. So we're going to dig in now a little bit more into this color contrast checker. We've gotten to look at it a little bit, but you'll see different things here. So in order to use this, you will need the hex code. Most programs are going to provide it. We're using Canva today. It's very easy to access the hex code. But pretty much any program will have it. And as we dig in more and have more time, we'll show you where to get that later on in these series of webinars. But you'll also notice there that there's a little scroll bar. And our next slide is going to show a little bit more about how that works. So here we have this beautiful light green, but unfortunately it doesn't have enough contrast with the white. So this little animation is showing you that if we just drag that scroll bar up, it will actually find the contrast it needs. And then you can just copy that hex code and place it in your document, flyer, whatever you're creating, and it now passes. That's just a quick tip for using that contrast checker. And that is it for my portion tonight. I'm passing it back over to you. I made it.
Perfect. And yeah, so that was, I hope that everybody can recognize that, even if we do these things every single day, we still have tools that help us do these things. And so that color contrast checker is just one little thing that we can do before we finalize a design. Check that color contrast. And if something doesn't match up, use the slider to get what you need and make things more accessible. But now we're going to dig a little bit into about accessibility in design. In our future sessions that we have, if you want to partake with us, we're going to dig into these really deep. But when we talk about accessible learning design, we talk about creating content, media strategies, instructional strategies that are going to resonate with all of our learners. Cast that really wide net and secure everybody. And so when we talk about this, when we talk about accessible, again, something that can easily be reached, entered, or used by those with disabilities, we think about inclusivity, ease of use. And then we think about learning design, that's the systematic planning and structuring of educational experiences. And so we can create accessible learning when we think about having multiple forms of engagement, representation, and action and expression. And so for this one, we're going to dig a little bit into something known as Universal Design for Learning. The acronym UDL, you may have heard that before. If you've not, that is completely fine as well. But it's a fantastic tool that's used to design more accessible learning. It's a framework developed by CAST to improve and optimize teaching and learning for all people based on scientific insights. And so this matrix of sorts will prompt you to provide multiple means of engagement, representation, and action and expression. And it's okay if this is a little jumbled in your brain. That's why we're going to join together the next couple of months and talk about this. But if you go to udlguidelines.cast.org, you will have access to this framework right here. And you can see we have different levels: access, support, and executive function. And when you think about your students' needs, when I think about my students who need just access, how can I make sure they're just accessing the content? And then how do I make sure that I'm supporting them as they're exploring that content? And how am I also preparing them with that executive functioning skills to do things on their own and build upon what knowledge we've created together? And so for tonight, since we don't have a lot of time, I want you to think about really quickly, how do you in your practice, how do you welcome the interests and identities of your learners? And you don't have to put this in the chat. I just want you to think about it. How do you build the emotional capacity of your learners? And I challenge you to think we can do this whether we have an hour-long training session or a development session, or we have 180 school days. And then how do we sustain effort and persistence with our learners, regardless of where they're at? Whatever strategies you're identifying in your brain, I want you to know that you're probably supporting some inclusive and accessible practices. So when I think about how we can design multiple means of engagement, as an instructional designer who creates courses for professors and other learning opportunities, I am always going to cast that wide net. And so I'm going to offer choice and autonomy with my learners, maybe through a choice board or different activities that I can give them that's going to meet that same instructional objective. And I'm going to always make sure that they understand the relevance and value of what we're discussing, why it's important, what we're talking about. We're going to nurture joy and play, and we're going to always try to address any biases, threats, and distractions. By doing those in my classroom, I'm providing access to my content. I want to take it further. I can challenge and find ways to support and make my students make meaning of what they're doing and the purpose of those goals, and foster belonging and community, and then try to build that emotional capacity at the executive functioning level. When you do things like optimize choice and autonomy, this is a simple choice board template that I got from Canva that you can search for. They give you ideas. If I implemented something like this in my practice and provided different options, I'm creating more access for my learners. Something as simple as a choice board. And if you say, John, choice boards are not simple, I encourage you to go to Magic School or one of your AI tools of choice. They give you some great examples to create choice boards. When I foster belonging in my community in my classes, whether it's a show and tell or asking people to collaborate with one another or work on building my own classroom community, I'm creating supportive, accessible environments. And when I cultivate empathy and restorative practices in my classroom and learning spaces, I am also teaching my students to foster empathy and restorative practices in their own personal life, and I'm creating a more accessible environment for my learners. So when we think about these things, when we think about how we optimize perception, UDL is going to have a nice little snippet of things you can do, real tangible items that you can do to increase access for your learners. We're going to explore all of these in the upcoming months, so I encourage you to sign up for some of our sessions. But this is one of my favorites. If I'm designing a learning opportunity, we're going to have text. We're probably going to have a podcast. I'm going to always use symbols as the father to a child who communicates with symbols. I understand the importance of having that to assist in language development and the co-construction of knowledge, and making sure that I'm not assessing and engaging my students all the same way at the same time. We want to cast that wide net. And so when we talk about these things in the upcoming month, we're going to dig deeper into UDL, into all of these different areas, and we're going to really explore what it means to create accessible learning design. And we're going to sprinkle in more of those tips from Kristen as well. So not only are you going to be able to learn to design more accessible learning, you're also going to learn some time-saving tips and tricks that are going to help you meet some of those legislative and moral and ethical opportunities that we have for our learners. So our next one is going to be on January 28th from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern, where we are going to dig into the engagement area of the UDL framework. And we're going to have more tips and tricks from Kristen as well as we explore creating access for everyone. I also want to take just a moment to remind you, if you are not yet signed up to attend the NCCE 25 conference in Seattle, it is still ongoing. You want to go and sign up. I was fortunate enough to be a featured speaker there last year. It was one of my favorite conferences, just getting to know everybody from the Pacific Northwest and around the country, and to come together to talk about how we better meet the needs of our learners using technology and innovation. So go to ncce.org/conference and you can sign up there. And I just want to thank you on behalf of Kristen and myself for taking time out during the holidays to learn about Access. We encourage you to head to ncce.org, subscribe on all of our social media channels at NCCE EdTech, and we hope that we'll see you at the end of January where we explore engagement a little bit further. That's all I have for you, Tammy.
Well, that's a good start. I know there's so much more, and I really encourage everyone to sign up. Now, a question came up about it's wonderful to have all these modalities and I love just the color contrast, because in my old age with glasses, I know how difficult it is sometimes to read things when the colors aren't right. But is there a piece in there where we would actually interact with the student and say, what are you finding challenging to reach that accessibility? Where does that fall in the UDL pantheon?
Well, I think personally, and I'll speak, Kristen, first, I think that comes into how we really meet our students at the beginning of every single school year. And I'm the first one to say that I've had students, especially in the university setting, where we don't get emails saying they don't have IEPs. Unless a student volunteers information, I'm going to not know that they need additional access. And so it's one of those things, knowing your learners and knowing what tools out of these things that we need to put in place for those specific students. So again, building the toolbox, not that we have to use it for everybody at all times, but we know what we can do to meet those learners.
Yeah, I love that. Kristen, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I just want to add exactly what John said. I agree. Since my role is now mostly working with trainers and educators, for any registration we have, we always ask about accommodations, and those are unique, and sometimes they're not things that we anticipated. So it is important to do both. Like, yes, learn these skills and have the general strategies and that UDL approach to setting up your classroom or your training environment. But then you also need to ask and get to know your participants, because some of those, they are going to have unique needs, and we need to be able to meet all of them.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, no, I love that. I had a student 3 years ago who she was losing her vision. She only had 17% in her right eye in the corner. And by the end of the year, she was down to 14. So I was constantly checking in with her to see, what else we could do to make it more, blow it up bigger, more, having text to speech or speech to text. So it seems to me that accessibility can change throughout the year, even for a specific learner. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's one of those things. It's not a one size fits all. And there are some things, as long as you know the considerations and some of these strategies, if you know that a student might need those visual supports, we're going to help explore how we can provide that in tools and in our pedagogy. So there's always more to learn, and we're creating more access for everybody, hopefully. So join us.
Excellent. So are your sessions going to be with NCCE? Do you have a link for signing up for those?
We should be having that soon. They're finalizing everything now, but that's why we want you to go to ncce.org and follow us on all of the socials, because this is just something we want to offer to make sure people have the resources. And if you want more tailored solutions, contact us at NCCE. We're happy to come to your school district wherever you are.
Perfect. Well, thank you both so much for your gift of time, for your talent, for your enthusiasm. It was a terrific session. I can't wait for the rest of your sessions. Everyone else, This is it for 2024 for Live from NCCE. We'll be back in 2025 in January with who you see on the screen there, Dan Fitzpatrick, who's one of our keynote speakers at the conference. And if you want to join us at the conference, go to ncce.org/conference. Sign up right now. So everyone have a wonderful holiday season. And thank you so much, Kristen and John Pauls. And see you next year.
Happy holidays.